Just 15 minutes from survival. Dead Maldives divers were just 15 minutes from safety before tragic cave diving disaster. A heartbreaking new investigation has revealed that the five Italian divers who died during a cave dive in the Maldives were only minutes away from reaching the surface before disaster struck in what experts are calling a tragic human error. Now let's explore the complete story from every perspective on our
I
AI
want you to just
podcast.
take a second and imagine the allure of the deep ocean.
Oh, yeah. It is a completely different world down there.
Right. You slip beneath the surface and all the noise of the world just completely fades away. You are surrounded by this incredible, weightless quiet.
It's why people get so addicted to it.
Exactly. For a lot of people, the ocean is the ultimate frontier of exploration. There is this profound feeling of discovery, of being somewhere entirely alien.
Yeah, but as beautiful as it is, the ocean is also just incredibly unforgiving.
It really is. And well, that is exactly what we are looking at today. We're exploring how breathtakingly fast that serene environment can turn into a literal trap.
It's a profound shift, and it happens almost instantaneously. You cross this invisible line in the water, and suddenly,
The physical rules of survival entirely change.
exactly, everything you know gets flipped upside down.
Which brings us to the mission of our deep dive today. We are investigating the devastating Vaavu Atoll tragedy.
The dive on May 14th.
Yeah, May 14 in the Maldives. A dive that claimed the lives of 5 people. Our goal for you, the listener, is to really understand the razor-thin margin of error in extreme environments.
Because it is incredibly thin.
It really is. We want to look at how expertise in one specific area doesn't automatically translate to another. And we'll examine the mechanics of what was, ultimately, a completely preventable tragedy.
A heartbreaking one, really.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because to really grasp what happened, we have to start by looking at exactly who went into the water that day.
And that is the crucial starting point. Because, the initial assumption people make when they hear about a tragedy like this on a tropical vacation is...
And it was just tourists.
Right. People assume it must have been a group of inexperienced vacationers who just bought a ticket for some dangerous excursion without knowing what they were actually signing up for.
Which happens,
But that assumption is fundamentally incorrect in this case.
not even close. Let's look at the actual group. We are talking about Monica Montefalcone, who is 52 years old, and a marine biologist from the University of Genoa.
A literal expert in marine environments.
Exactly. And she was diving with her 20-year-old daughter, Georgia Somokol. Then you have Muriel Odenino, a 31-year-old researcher,
Right.
and Federico Galtieri, also 31, and a recent university graduate. And leading them, Gianluca Benedetti, who was the group's certified diving instructor.
So you're looking at a highly educated, highly ocean-literate group of people here.
Totally.
You have a marine biologist, researchers, a certified instructor. These are individuals who have dedicated significant portions of their lives to studying and navigating the marine environment.
They weren't amateurs.
Not at all. They understand ocean currents, they understand the biology of the reef, and they are intimately familiar with standard scuba diving protocols.
Which is exactly why this whole thing feels so incredibly jarring to wrap your head around.
It really does.
The best analogy I can come up with is this. It feels like a group of seasoned race car drivers getting into a fatal crash while they are, off-roading in a jungle.
That's a really good way to put it.
Yes, they absolutely know vehicles. They know engines and speed and steering. But they do not know that specific terrain.
And that new terrain completely nullifies their usual advantages.
But wait, I have to push back here. I can't fathom a marine biologist and a certified instructor making a rookie mistake and literally walking right into a fatal trap.
It sounds impossible, right?
Yeah. Shouldn't their instincts kick in? Doesn't their baseline knowledge count for something when things go sideways?
Well, baseline knowledge absolutely counts for something in the open ocean. If they had encountered a strong current on a reef.
They know what to do.
Exactly. Or an equipment issue in open water, they would have known exactly how to handle it. The danger here actually lies in the illusion of safety that comes from that exact adjacent expertise.
The illusion of safety.
Yeah, because open water diving and cave diving are two fundamentally different disciplines. It is not a natural progression from one to the other.
Oh, really?
It is a completely different sport that just happens to use similar breathing equipment.
Wow. So you're saying the very fact that they were so comfortable in the ocean is what blinded them to the danger?
Precisely. In open water diving, you're trained to manage your buoyancy, monitor your air, and handle the environment in this somewhat open three-dimensional space.
Right, you have room to move.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Cave diving takes all of those requirements and places them inside an entirely unforgiving geological structure.
Where you can't just move around freely.
Right. Their baseline knowledge might have actually given them a fatal false sense of security because they felt so relaxed in the water, they didn't fully respect the absolute boundary line they crossed the moment they moved from the open ocean
Into the cave.
into the enclosed, rocky space of that cave system.
And that boundary line is terrifying. Let's look at the architecture of the trap itself, because the environment absolutely changed the rules of physics for them.
It really did.
When you piece together the timeline of this dive, they entered this underwater cave near the Vaavu Atoll at a depth of around 164 feet.
Which is already deep.
Very deep. And then the tunnel eventually took them nearly 200 feet below the ocean's surface.
Which is an extreme depth, even if you are out in the open water. But when you are inside a cave at that depth, the variables of survival multiply exponentially.
Because when you look at the physics of cave diving, the dangers read like an absolute nightmare scenario.
Oh, absolutely.
We are talking about tight, restrictive spaces, complete and total darkness, because, there is absolutely no ambient light from the sun reaching 200 feet down inside a rock formation.
It's pitch black.
Yeah, you have severely limited visibility. And then the most crucial, terrifying detail of all, the absolute inability to make a direct emergency ascent to the surface.
What's fascinating here is how entirely counterintuitive that last point is to everything you learn in standard scuba training.
Right, because you always learn to go up.
Exactly. Think about the instinct you mentioned earlier. If you were in the open ocean and something goes wrong, your regulator malfunctions, or you get separated from your group, or you just feel panicked, you always have an ultimate failsafe. Up.
Up is always safety.
That is safety. You can drop your weights, inflate your buoyancy compensator, and go up to the air.
You might get decompression sickness, you might get the bends.
But you are alive.
Yeah.
And you are breathing oxygen.
Right.
Your open water instinct is to swim up. But in a cave, up is a ceiling of solid rock. I want you to imagine you are listening to this right now in your car or sitting in your living room, and suddenly someone throws a heavy pitch black blanket over your head.
That is terrifying.
You can't see the dashboard, you can't see your hands, and you have no idea which way is the door. That is the reality of a cave.
You're just trapped.
If your air supply has an issue, or if you simply lose your sense of direction, you cannot swim up. The only way out to safety, the only way back to the air, is to navigate the exact winding, complex, three-dimensional path you used to get in.
It is entirely unforgiving. The cave basically removes your escape hatch.
It does.
And understanding that deadly environment leads us directly to the most painful question of this whole incident. How are you supposed to survive it?
Preparation.
Right. If the ocean strips away the escape hatch, you have to bring the right tools to compensate. Which brings us to what went tragically wrong here.
Yes. The reality of what went wrong comes into focus through the findings of a Finnish rescue diver named Sami Pakarinen.
He was involved in the recovery efforts.
He was, and his assessment of the situation really pinpoints the mechanical failure of this dive. It wasn't a failure of their breathing equipment. It was a failure of their specialized safety tools.
Because the recovery team detailed exactly what they found, or rather, what they didn't find. The group was missing proper cave diving gear. Specifically, they were missing guide ropes and diving reels.
Which are essential.
Pakarinen stated plainly that the equipment they had wasn't optimal for where they were. They were not using proper underwater caving gear.
He was very clear about that.
Yeah, he said in cave diving, using a safety line is extremely important. And ultimately, he concluded that the main cause of the tragedy was human error.
That phrase, human error, it can sometimes sound like a dismissal,
Like someone just pushed the wrong button on a machine.
Exactly. But in extreme environments, human error is usually a compounding series of seemingly small decisions that cascade into a catastrophe.
Wow, yeah.
Choosing to proceed into an overhead environment without a physical, continuous guideline back to the open water, that is the primary fatal decision here.
Here's where it gets really interesting and deeply tragic. When I was trying to visualize how a safety line actually functions underwater, it almost sounded completely primitive to me.
Primitive?
Yeah.
How so?
Well, we have all these advanced dive computers that monitor our nitrogen levels and our heart rates on our wrists, right? But the ultimate lifesaver in a cave is like a piece of string.
A literal string.
It reminds me of the old fairy tale of Hansel and Gretel leaving breadcrumbs in the forest so they can find their way home.
That is a great comparison.
Yes.
Exactly, but imagine that forest is completely submerged in water. It's pitch black.
And cold.
And cold. And the breadcrumbs you drop don't just sit perfectly on the ground, they float away in the current.
Oh, man.
Or worse, the breadcrumbs become invisible because every time you take a step, a massive cloud of thick dust rises up and blinds you.
Right. The silt.
That is the crucial mechanism here. When you are inside a cave system without that physical, tactile reel of rope that is tied off at the entrance and unspooled as you go deeper, you are relying solely on your memory and your sight.
And you can't trust your sight in there.
Not at all. Because in a cave, your sight can be eliminated in a fraction of a second. The floor of an underwater cave isn't clean rock. It is often covered in decades of fine, powdery limestone sediment.
Just waiting to be kicked up.
A single errant kick of a fin, or even just the bubbles from your exhalation hitting the ceiling, can disturb that powder.
And because there's no water current inside the cave to wash it away, it just hangs there.
It hangs there instantly. Within seconds, the water goes from crystal clear to what cave divers refer to as a silt out.
A silt out.
It is a complete and utter loss of visibility. It's like driving into a wall of thick fog with your high beams on. The light from your flashlight just bounces off the suspended particles right back into your eyes.
So you can't see anything.
You literally cannot see your hand touching your own map.
Oh my God. So without the rope, if a silt out happens, you are instantly, physically, completely disoriented.
You lose your sense of up, down, left, and right. You don't know which tunnel led you in and which tunnel leads deeper into the maze.
That is a nightmare.
If you have a guide rope, a silt out is scary, but it's manageable.
Because you can just grab it.
You simply close your eyes, reach out, find the line, make an OK sign around it with your fingers, and physically pull yourself hand over hand back to the entrance.
It's a literal lifeline.
But without those reels, limited visibility doesn't just mean you can't see the beautiful rock formations. It means you are immediately and potentially fatally lost in a labyrinth.
And that disorientation, that lack of the essential tether back to the world above, it culminated in a final timeline that is just agonizing to comprehend.
It really is.
Because they didn't just get lost and immediately run out of air. They fought.
They fought hard. The details of the recovery really paint a picture of how this nightmare unfolded deep beneath the surface.
When the recovery divers finally reached them, they found 4 of the victims together deep inside the cave system.
Together.
Yes, and Pakarinen offered a devastating assessment of their location. He stated that they were only about 15 minutes away from reaching the surface when they ultimately ran out of options.
Just 15 minutes.
The recovery timeline itself shows how brutal this environment was. Gianluca Benedetti, the instructor, was found on the same day as the incident, and his body was returned to Italy.
Right.
But the other 4, the mother, the daughter, the researcher, and the graduate, were so difficult to reach that they were found days later. Their remains weren't repatriated until early on a Saturday.
The fact that 4 of them stayed together speaks volumes about their discipline.
Yeah, they didn't panic and scatter.
Exactly. They attempted to manage the crisis as a team, relying on their training. But the environment simply didn't allow for a solution without that guideline.
So what does this all mean? How do we even begin to contextualize that margin of 15 minutes?
It's hard to grasp.
Because to me, sitting here on dry land, 15 minutes is nothing. It's like hitting snooze on your alarm twice. It's waiting in line for a coffee. It feels like they were right at the finish line.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, we have to look at the relativity of time. You're right on land. 15 minutes is a minor delay.
Barely an inconvenience.
But time is utterly relative to the environment you are in and the resources you have available.
Right.
At 200 feet underwater, time isn't measured in minutes. It is measured in breaths.
Wow.
It is measured by the pressure gauge on your tank.
Measured in breaths. That is heavy. Explain the mechanics of that, because why wouldn't a standard tank last them those final 15 minutes?
Well, it comes down to the physics of water pressure. At 200 feet down, the water pressure is immense.
Squeezing everything.
Right. And it actually compresses the air you are breathing. That means every single inhalation at 200 feet pulls vastly more air molecules out of your tank than a breath at the surface would.
So you're literally consuming more air with every single breath.
Exactly. Your tank empties significantly faster just by existing at that depth.
And then you add panic into the mix.
Exactly. Add the physiological response to stress. When you realize you are lost in a dark cave, your body goes into fight or flight.
Your heart rate goes up.
Your heart rate spikes.
Yeah.
Your breathing naturally becomes rapid and shallow. You might start hyperventilating. Combine the extreme water pressure with a doubled or tripled breathing rate, and you burn through your remaining air supply at an astonishing, terrifying speed.
The air just vanishes.
It vanishes.
Yeah.
Now, place that physiological reality inside a dark, enclosed cave where you have lost your way because you don't have a guide rope, and you are surrounded by a cloud of silt.
You can't see anything.
Right. In that context, 15 minutes is not a short physical distance. It is an impassable eternity. Being 15 minutes away from safety when you have 0 minutes of air left means you might as well be on the moon.
That is a haunting perspective. The physical distance might have been incredibly short, but the logistical and environmental distance was infinite without the right equipment.
It was an impossible gap to bridge.
It really brings home the mission of our deep dive today. When we look at the summary of this entire tragedy at the Vaavu Atoll, it is clear that it wasn't some dramatic, cinematic monster of the deep that claimed the lives of these 5 passionate explorers.
No, it wasn't a sudden earthquake or a massive equipment explosion.
Or a sudden medical event.
No, it was the subtle compounding effect of overconfidence in one area bleeding into another.
Yeah.
It was the missing equipment, those simple analog life-saving ropes combined with the completely unforgiving, inflexible rules of a dark, enclosed, overhead environment.
It is a heartbreaking reminder for all of us, no matter what we are doing, of the absolute value of respecting boundaries.
Absolutely.
It is so critical to recognize when your own expertise, even if it is vast and impressive and hard-earned, might not actually cover a new, seemingly related challenge. Just because you are an absolute master of the open water does not mean you are prepared for the cave.
This raises an important question, and it's something I want you to really think about as we wrap up our investigation today.
Okay.
We have seen how a group of highly intelligent, ocean-loving scientists and an experienced instructor fell victim to a subtle overestimation of their own preparedness.
Yeah, very subtle.
So in your own life, whether that is in your career, your hobbies, or even your daily routines, where might your general competence be masking a lack of specialized preparation? When might you be swimming into a cave thinking it's just the open ocean?
That is a phenomenal question to sit with. And a sobering reminder to always check our gear, literally and metaphorically, before we cross the line into the unknown.
Check your gear.
Always. We want to thank you for joining us as we explore the depths of this story and the physical realities it leaves behind. Keep questioning, keep preparing.
Okay, one question for you. What exactly happened during the final moments of the Maldives cave dive, and could the 5 Italian divers have survived if they had followed standard cave diving safety protocols and emergency procedures? Don't forget to comment it. Thanks.